Have you ever watched someone walk into a room and felt the entire energy shift? Not because they were the loudest person there. Not because they were dressed to impress. But because of something you couldn't quite name, something invisible, something that made your eyes follow them without your permission. If you've ever experienced that, then you already know that real attraction is not about surface things. It never was. Today, I want to tell you a story. A real, deeply human story. And woven inside it, I'm going to walk you through 6 specific behaviors, backed by psychology, that make men fall hard, fall deep, and fall for keeps. Stay with me until the very end, because the 6th one is the one nobody talks about, and it might be the most powerful thing on this entire list. So let's begin with a man named Daniel. Daniel was 32 years old. He was the kind of person who trusted logic more than feelings. He was a software engineer, someone who lived in a world of systems, patterns, and predictable outcomes. He had been in relationships before. Some had been good. Some had been painful. But none of them had ever left him genuinely confused about what was happening inside his own chest. That changed the evening he walked into a small community art workshop that he had absolutely no intention of enjoying. He only went because a colleague practically dragged him there. He sat down, looked around at the unfamiliar faces, and fully expected to spend 2 hours waiting for it to be over. And then he noticed her. Her name was Layla. She was sitting 2 seats away, and she wasn't doing anything particularly remarkable. She was just there. Fully, completely there. While most people in the room were glancing at their phones between activities, stealing looks at notifications, mentally somewhere else, Layla was not. When the instructor spoke, she listened. Not the way people half listen while composing their responses, she actually listened, with her whole face open and her attention undivided. When the woman beside her said something small and forgettable, Layla turned toward her, not just her head but her entire body, as if that woman's words were the most interesting thing in the room. Daniel noticed this. And something in him, without his permission, leaned toward it. Psychologists call this attentive presence. And in research after research, genuine presence, the kind where you are truly, undistractedly here, is one of the most powerful signals a human being can send to another. Because what presence communicates, underneath all the words and surface behavior, is something deeply primal: you matter. Right now, in this moment, you are worth my full attention. For men especially, psychological studies on emotional needs and attraction consistently show that the desire to feel truly seen, not evaluated, not managed, but genuinely witnessed, runs very deep. Most men move through their days being functional, being useful, being competent, but rarely feeling like another person is actually looking at them rather than through them. So when a woman offers that kind of presence, the brain doesn't register it as simply polite behavior. It registers it as something rare. Something worth remembering. That evening, the instructor asked participants to pair up, and Daniel ended up beside Layla. She asked him a simple question about the project he was working on. But she listened to his answer like it was genuinely interesting. Like he was genuinely interesting. He wasn't used to that feeling. And something shifted in him, quietly, without announcement. Later, he asked her what she did for work. He expected the usual answer. A job title. An industry. The standard social script most people recite at first meetings. Instead, Layla's whole face changed. She lit up in a way that was completely unperformed. I teach kids to read, she said. Children who have been told they're slow learners, that something's wrong with them. And I sit with them one-on-one, and we work through it together, until one day something just clicks. The moment it clicks and they read their first full sentence on their own, I've never felt anything like it in my life. Her eyes were alive when she said it. Not just animated, alive. There was a world inside her that existed entirely on its own terms, independent of anyone watching. This is something psychology understands very well. There is a concept called differentiation of self, developed by psychiatrist Murray Bowen, and it describes a person's ability to maintain their own identity, their own values, their own direction, while still being fully capable of emotional connection with others. People who have developed this quality are not emotionally needy. They are not waiting to be rescued or completed. But they are also not cold or closed off. They simply have a self, a rich, textured, independent self that has been built through genuine living. And this is extraordinarily attractive. Not just on a surface level, but on a deep psychological one. Because a woman who has purpose and passion sends a very specific message to the brain of the person sitting across from her: she doesn't need me to give her life meaning. She already has meaning. She is inviting me to join her, and that shift, from need to want, from emptiness to fullness, changes everything about how attraction registers. Daniel drove home that night thinking about her students. About the moment she had described, a child finally reading. He wanted to hear more of her life. He texted his colleague before he even reached his apartment. Who was that woman? They were both back the following week. When Layla saw Daniel walk through the door this time, she smiled. It was small, quiet, genuine. Not a performance designed to pull him in, just a real, human acknowledgement that she was glad he was there. Then she turned back to what she was doing. She didn't make a production of it. She didn't rush over. She simply let him know, through that small honest gesture, that his presence registered positively with her. And then she went back to her world. This is something attachment theory helps us understand beautifully. John Bowlby spent decades studying the way human beings bond with one another, and what he found, later expanded by researcher Mary Ainsworth, is that people operate from different internal blueprints when it comes to closeness and connection. Some people are anxiously attached, they crave closeness but fear losing it, so they pursue and perform and constantly seek reassurance. Some are avoidantly attached, they protect themselves by staying distant and difficult to reach. But people with secure attachment are different. They are warm and steady at the same time. They can show genuine care without needing an immediate response. They can be open without being desperate. They are okay with not knowing exactly where something is going, because they trust themselves regardless of the outcome. What Layla was doing, that warm smile followed by easy, unforced normalcy, was secure attachment in its most natural form. And for Daniel, who had spent time in relationships where emotional intensity felt overwhelming and exhausting, where every interaction seemed loaded with invisible expectation, being around Layla felt like stepping into a room where the air was simply good. He didn't feel pressure. He didn't feel like he was being evaluated at every turn. He felt like he could just exist, and that would be enough. He started finding reasons to stay a little longer at the workshop each week. By the third session, they were talking the way people talk when they've stopped trying to impress each other. Easy. Loose. The comfortable back and forth where you forget to be nervous. At one point, Daniel made an offhand comment, something slightly dismissive about adults who pursue creative hobbies. He didn't intend it harshly. It was a throwaway line, the kind people say without thinking. Layla paused. She didn't get defensive. She didn't make it a confrontation. She didn't smile and let it pass to keep the peace. She tilted her head slightly and said, calmly and with warmth, actually, I think creative practice might be one of the most mentally healthy things an adult can do. There's quite a bit of research that supports it. That was all. No drama. No edge. Just honesty. And Daniel felt something unexpected move through him, respect. Social psychologists talk about a quality called epistemic courage, the willingness to say true things even when there is a small social risk in saying them. Most people avoid this constantly. We soften and deflect and agree and go along because maintaining comfort feels safer than maintaining honesty. We have been taught, subtly and not so subtly, that keeping the peace is more important than keeping our voice. But a woman who holds her own perspective, gently, without aggression, without needing to win, communicates something that registers very deeply in a man who is looking for a real partner. It tells him, she has standards. She believes in things. She won't just mirror back whatever I say to keep me happy. And crucially, it means that when she does agree with him, it means something. When she chooses him, it will mean something, because she is actually choosing, not just drifting along. Daniel apologized for the comment. Layla shrugged and said simply, you didn't know. And somehow, that easy generosity made him trust her more, not less. That was the night he asked if she wanted to get coffee. She said yes. Coffee became longer conversations. Longer conversations became walks. Walks became evenings that neither of them wanted to end, where they would stand outside one of their apartments for another 20 minutes before finally saying goodbye. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel found himself paying attention to something he couldn't quite explain. Every time he was with her, he felt different. Not just happy, though he was happy, but more like himself. More like the version of himself he had wanted to be but rarely managed to access. When he mentioned at work that he was nervous about a big presentation, she didn't immediately flood him with reassurance the way people often do, that reflexive I'm sure you'll be great that feels supportive but doesn't actually help. Instead, she asked him questions. She helped him think through his own concerns. She walked him through his own reasoning until he arrived at his own answer. And then she looked at him and said, see, you already knew what to do. She had a way of reflecting his own competence back to him. Not flattering him. Not inflating him. Just showing him what was already there. When he mentioned, almost apologetically, that he had been interested in amateur astronomy since he was a teenager, something he'd never brought up with anyone because it felt too niche, too earnest, she didn't smile politely and change the subject. She leaned in. She asked how it worked. She asked what his favorite constellation was. She asked whether he had a telescope. He did. He hadn't taken it out in 2 years. The following weekend, he set it up on his balcony and spent 3 hours looking at the sky. He texted Layla a photo of the moon. She replied immediately with 3 questions. There is a theory in psychology called self-expansion theory, developed by researchers Arthur and Elaine Aron, and it describes one of the core engines of deep human attraction. We are powerfully, consistently drawn to people who help us expand, who help us access more of ourselves, try new things, feel more capable, live more fully. It is not about changing who you are. It is about a person bringing out what was already inside you, waiting. The people around whom you feel you are growing, the people who make the world feel bigger and more interesting, those are the people the brain begins to crave. Those are the people love builds itself around. Daniel was falling. He knew it. And what moved him most was that he couldn't point to a single dramatic moment that had caused it. It was accumulative, layered, quiet. Like she had been building something in him one small, honest brick at a time, and by the time he noticed the structure, it was already something beautiful. And then came the evening that changed everything. They were sitting on a bench near a small lake after a long walk, and the conversation had been easy and light. In one of those natural silences that comfortable people allow between them, Layla said quietly, "Can I tell you something a little embarrassing?" He said yes. She told him that when she was 24, she had gone through a long period of deep loneliness. A relationship had ended, and she had realized, in the aftermath, how small she had made herself to fit inside it. She had pulled away from friendships. She had stopped doing things she loved. She had spent close to a year in a kind of fog, rebuilding herself slowly, reclaiming her interests, her voice, her sense of direction, piece by piece. "I think about that version of me sometimes," she said. "And I feel proud of her for getting back up. But I also remember how hard it was." There was silence. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. Not because her story was tragic. Not because it was dramatic. But because she had trusted him with it. Because she had chosen, in that quiet moment, to be real with him before she had any guarantee of how he would receive it. Researcher Brené Brown has spent decades studying human connection, and one of the most important things her research has shown is this: vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is the single most direct pathway to genuine intimacy that human beings have. When a person shares something true and tender, something that cost them something to say out loud, they are doing something extraordinary. They are extending trust before trust has been fully established. They are choosing connection over the safety of self-protection. And this act, choosing to be seen before you are sure it is safe, is one of the most powerful invitations one human being can offer another. For men especially, a woman's first vulnerability has a particular and profound effect. Most men have learned, across years of cultural conditioning, to keep their tender places hidden. To be competent and strong and unshakable. The walls they build are not signs of coldness, they are signs of self-protection. And when a woman is vulnerable first, she doesn't just share her own story. She dismantles, quietly, the permission structure that told him he had to keep his walls up too. She makes space for him to be a full human being in her presence. Daniel sat there for a moment. And then, for the first time in years, he told someone the truth. He told her about his father. About the silence between them that had settled in over a decade and never fully lifted. About the way he sometimes wondered, in his most honest moments, whether he was actually capable of the kind of warmth and closeness he saw in other families, whether something in him was missing or broken or simply untrained. He had never said those words to anyone. Not to friends, not to therapists, not to anyone he had been with before. Layla didn't flinch. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't offer reassurance designed to make the discomfort go away faster. She just sat with him in it. And after a moment she said, softly, "I think the fact that you wonder about that means you're more capable of it than you know." He would carry those words with him for the rest of his life. 6 months later, Daniel told his colleague, the one who had pulled him to that art workshop against his will, that he was in love. His colleague laughed and asked what it was about her. Daniel thought for a long time. "She's just real," he said finally. "She's completely, fully real. And being around her makes me feel like I can be real too." And that, when you strip away all the theory and all the research, is what every single one of those 6 behaviors comes down to. Layla was present, so he felt worth paying attention to. She had her own life and passion, so she invited him rather than needed him. She was warm without desperation, so he felt safe rather than pressured. She was honest in small brave ways, so he knew her choices meant something. She helped him feel like the best version of himself, so he grew in her presence. And she was vulnerable first, so he finally had permission to be a full human being in front of another person. None of it was strategy. None of it was performance. It was simply the radical, quiet, extraordinary act of being genuinely herself, fully, without apology, without armor. And the deepest truth that psychology keeps returning to, across decades of research and thousands of studies, is this: the most magnetic thing a person can be is authentically, courageously themselves. Not a curated version. Not a performance calibrated for approval. Just real. Because the person who is worth loving, the person worth building something with, will not fall for the mask. They will fall for the human being underneath it. And that human being has always deserved to be loved. Music fades gently. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more psychology-backed insights on love, connection, and what it actually means to build something real with another person, subscribe. New videos every single week. Until next time, take care of yourself. And take care of each other.